So a ley line is a series of ancient sites. It could be 4, 5 or more, it could be hundreds technically, but it has to be in a dead straight line going across the landscape. And these were sites that were built and placed by ancient people when they were constructed them many thousands of years ago.
Ley lines can be quite complex. There's 3 types of leys according to the research from the 80s onwards by Sig Longren. The first category is what Alfred Watkins, the grandfather of leys, saw in the 1930s, and that's ancient sites of all different eras aligned in a straight line. And they could be, for example, a Neolithic cove, they could be a Bronze Age stone circle, they could be an Iron Age hill fort, ceremonial centre, and right the way through to a Christian church or cathedral, all aligned in a straight line which could be hundreds of miles long. That's a topographical ley. Further investigation from the 1960s onwards found that certain dowsers were finding energy along some of the topographical alignments, not all of them, and they called these energy lines. And then what was discovered after that was that some of these energy lines are literally flowing with energy aligned to an astronomical event. So these are astronomical energy leys, and that astronomical event could be the moon's most northerly moonrise, for example, or the summer solstice rising sun event. So that's the categories of leys that we have. 3 main types: topographical, energy, and astronomical lines with energy flowing through them.
We find that many of these prehistoric sites are connected through a series of other sites like standing stones or other mounds that are all in a line. We call them leys or ley lines. Why would the ancients have put their monuments in a line? Now, it is my feeling that what they were trying to do is channel the energies of a vortex or portal site to another location by creating this line of sites.
There are quite a few different alignments of interest that are extremely long. Obviously in England we have the Michael line, which you have the Michael and Mary energy lines kind of weaving around it like a caduceus, but we also have a very long alignment stretching from Skellig Michael through St Michael's Mount, through Mont Saint Michel, so we're going from Ireland to England to France, then all the way through Europe, going through many Michael and Apollo sanctuaries, through Delphi, Dodona and Delos, oracle sites in ancient Greece, and finishing in Megiddo in Israel, or Armageddon, which is one of the names given to it. And so this is 2,500 miles long, this particular alignment. This was written about in detail by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. And there's other ones, and there's other great alignments that are like great earth circles that go all the way around the world. We even have one that stretches from the Bluestone Preseli site through Stonehenge, and that continues through Giza, it continues through Delphi and some other sites, going all the way around through, even through Serpent Mound, and back through the Carrowkeel complex in ancient Ireland, back to Stonehenge again. This was discovered by Robin Heath.
In Peru, for instance, they radiate out like spokes of a wheel from the central omphalos, or centre of centres, that was an Incan site in Cusco, and that the energies of this centre of centres were taken out to various other places in the Incan Empire by a series of prehistoric ancient sites, power sites, sacred sites, whatever you want to call them, that led to other places. And I believe that there's a function here. This was supposed to carry this energy and then reconstitute it in a way at its destination point.
One of the great earth circles was discovered by a gentleman called Jim Allison, and he basically put it forward that he believed it was the original equator of the earth. Now, this went through many major sites all the way around the planet, including Easter Island, Giza and many other sites in Africa, virtually everywhere. This was adopted and featured in the Revelation of the Pyramids documentary as well, where they extended the width of it and found even more sites connected with this as well, suggesting it was deliberately placed almost like a kind of surveying marker around the entire planet, and it was known about in very, very ancient times.
This is the St. Michael Ley, or St. Michael Ley Line. It says here it starts at Michael's Mount, but actually starts at Carnarvon. And Avebury, which is here, is at the centre of the actual ley. And we can see there's Borough Mump, Glastonbury, Tor, all aligned upon it. According to John Michel, it faces the direction of the Beltane, the May Day sunrise, and the Samhain, the Halloween sunset. But in the 1980s, what Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst discovered was two currents entwining the ley. One was male and one was female. Every 10 kilometres or so on the female earth current, they found a church dedicated to Mary Magdalene or the Virgin Mary, so they called that current Mary. And on the Michael current, they found numerous churches called St. Michael or St. George, and they chose to call it St. Michael after the St. Michael Ley Line. Telluric currents are literally earth currents. It was discovered in the 1980s by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, who wrote The Sun and the Serpent, that there's mighty earth currents, sometimes, meters wide, and then there's sometimes much smaller currents that could be under a meter wide, and these interlace the planet. So they're a form of earth energy.
Telluric currents are part of the magnetic field of the planet, and these divide into like these small currents during the sunrise, and they disperse during the sunset. And they're linked with magnetism, but they also are linked with electric charge, hence the name telluric. And they kind of emanate these energies which were collected by the ancients, I believe, going into the ancient sites, into these chambers or into entrances to the sites. And so they're quite well documented scientifically, but they've only recently been applied to the way the ancients used them in relatively recent times.
With Rodney Hale, we decided to test the frequencies of these earth currents here at Avebury on this actual earth current that we're sat on, which is called the Mary current. And we put in probes into the ground, which were copper, and they were quite long. And what Rodney discovered was at the centre of the Mary current, you have three lines of energy, which are roughly around 25 hertz when he decoded that. He did a control. Outside of the earth current, there wasn't that activity as much as on the actual center of the line. So we know that they conduct these hertz frequencies. Some earth currents are global. So for example, here at Avebury, we have the Mary and Michael currents that entwine the St. Michael Ley Line. But some of those energies go to Mount Shasta, for example. So what you can do is you have the energy influence in this geology flowing around the world. Mary comes in from this side, so I'm going to douse Mary now. So she's coming in from Wading Hill over there. I've got a reaction here, so I put my rod back into search. And I've got reaction here. She's co-joined with Michael now, so the two currents are one. So this is Mary. Now let's find Michael. We're going to find the trailing edge of Michael. That's about here. So Michael is this side and Mary is that. And the middle of the currents is about here. And both these currents are flowing harmoniously together towards the obelisk stone, which is a central feature of the southern inner circle, and then they flow to the central feature of the northern inner circle, the cove stones, and that's where they depart company. Mary goes off to the right and Michael goes off to the left, and nowhere else are they so powerful as at Avebury Henge itself, that contains the world's largest stone circle. Earth energies interlace the planet. They're not necessarily a grid system. You could get an earth current flowing that way and that way. They're completely independent. They're likened to the veins of Gaia, and the big earth currents are likened to her arteries. Some of these currents wrap around leys in a caduceus fashion. So you have literally the ley flowing and the currents entwining those. That's called a ley system. And these ley systems can be found throughout the world. I often said to authors such as Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst that I think the reason why earth currents are associated with a ley line, they're never more than about sort of 5-10 miles apart from the ley. So if you imagine that you have them sweeping around that ley, I think the ley is somehow ancient technology that controls the flow of the earth currents. There are two main global energies that flow around the world. One is called the rainbow serpent, and the rainbow serpent is Mary and Michael together, flowing as one, and they target certain ancient sites worldwide. They target, for example, Lake Titicaca. Then they move on through to Glastonbury, Avebury, and Shaftesbury has always been noted was a power point as well. Then they go on to Moscow, for example, because Moscow is a power place. Then they go down to the four mountains of Bali and through to Tibet, and then on to Uluru, Ayers Rock in Australia. That's the route of the rainbow serpent. And the plumed serpent targets other sites, but they cross at Lake Titicaca. If you imagine surrounding Lake Titicaca, you have a circle, and that circle is 111 miles wide. That's the energy field of that crossing point. It is enormous. What happens, energetically speaking, when two ley lines cross each other is the area becomes greater. So by that I mean the lines expand, and it can, for some, create a mild vortex energy point. When two ley lines cross with different colour frequencies, that becomes very, very powerful, because in the dowsing world, colour combinations of leys and colour combinations of earth energies decree how you use it. So for example, blue and white crossing represents a very healing area, and any vortex spin effect that the rod will react to on the crossing point of those leys would said to be healing. But if you take another colour combination, for example like white and red, that's supposed to be the colours of the warrior. That can make you slightly aggressive. And if you had horses or animals, particularly on a ley with a red frequency, they never rest. They will always be irritable in some manner. So we see the crossing point of leys to create a colour harmonic that allows you to interact with that line or that crossing point in a particular manner. When three lines cross with a different colour frequencies, the commonest combinations are red, white and blue. And we notice that a lot of European flags have that combination. So when you have royal residences, for example, associated to leys, they're going to be 9 times out of 10 on the red, white and blue ley.